So hi everyone, this is a 2009 R-350 and today we're primarily going to be working on the air conditioning system. And the main reason I decided to put this video online is because I couldn't find any reference for working on this car. So if you're the private Mercedes owner, you need help in repairing the air conditioning system, you may find this video helpful. So in my case, what happened was the AC began to blow warm air. It didn't go all at once. It actually took a couple of months for it to no longer blow any cold air at all. Quickly, everyone, I wanted to go over the tools that you're going to need to work on this car, and it's really not that bad, but you do need a good quality torque wrench, telescoping magnet, you need a set of Torx, a set of E-Torx, and a set of Allen socket bits. As far as the vacuum pump, I have here a 1/3 horsepower vacuum pump. Ideally, I would want a stronger vacuum pump than that, but amazingly, this one did do the job. It did put 29 inches of vacuum, and we'll see the end result. So it's good enough, I guess, if this is all you can get your hands on, and a decent set of gauges, of course. As far as recovery container, you do need one. If you don't have one, you can pay a local shop to retrieve the AC, to recover the AC. I don't think they'll charge that much just to pull the AC out so you can do your job. And please ignore that car in the background. That's a 318 Ti that I'm also trying to restore at the same time, but that's not the one that we're talking about in this video. I also wanted to show you this chart here for reference. When you work at a dealer, you don't really need this because the machines very precisely meter oil and refrigerant. But for a do-it-yourselfer, this is definitely a good thing to be familiar with, because these are acceptable pressures for any given temperature, and this will help you diagnose as well as properly recharge your vehicle. Anyways, here's where the high side port is hiding, right behind the grill towards the right side of the condenser. So when you're beginning to diagnose, you don't necessarily want to pull the entire grill out. If you undo that bolt there towards the right and slightly pull the grill towards the front, that'll give you enough access to connect your hose on the high side. Anyways, once you do decide you are going to have to do the job, of course at that time you're going to have to remove the front grille, and actually quite a bit more. So this is where the high side port is located, as you can see behind that grille, and this is where our low side is located, towards the right side of the engine, going towards the back, towards the brake booster. Okay, so here are the initial pressures on this car. If you notice, our low side is too high, and that tells me that the compressor is not relieving the pressure from the low side onto the high side. So our high side is too low. In other words, that pressure is accumulating behind the compressor because the compressor is not doing its job. And here is a system diagram that I drew up because it's been a while since I did an AC job, and well, for me, having a visual of the system really helps interpret the readings on the gauges, because you can see all the components that could restrict flow and where they are in the system. So it really helps. And I didn't feel like purchasing an expensive compressor and other components. So anyways, I just did this to eliminate doubt for myself. And if you are new to automotive AC, I would really recommend getting familiar with the AC system. You can find a similar diagram online, and it really isn't all that complicated to understand it. But I won't bore you with this on this video, just wanted to make that suggestion. And that's our compressor all the way down there, and there are 3 bolts that you're going to have to access from underneath to remove it. And as you can see right above it, that's the belt tensioner. And all the way in the back is the expansion valve, and for that you will need a long extension and a magnet, as you will see shortly. And finally, once you remove the front grille and bumper, you will have access to the dryer. And there is no way around this unless you cut a hole on the side. Okay, so first you'll want to remove the engine cover, and this just pulls right up. And the next, you'll want to remove the air intake hoses, and this also just pull apart. Okay, so now you are ready to remove the air filter housing, and there's just one clip that holds it in the back with no additional bolts. You just have to firmly lift up and remove it. Okay, so now if you didn't already remove the front grille, you'll want to do this at this time. And as we mentioned before, there are 4 bolts that hold it at the top, but there's also a couple of clips that hold it to the main bumper. And for that, you may need a screwdriver to pry them open just enough to release them, but not too much where you'll break them. Okay, so once you remove the front grille, we are ready to remove the bumper. And here are the basic instructions. So there are 4 main bolts and 1 clip on either side of the bumper which hold the bumper to the fenders. Now the clip has 1 screw labeled as number 1, as you can see in the picture, and after you remove that screw, the clip rotates and pushes away to remove. And this is where that clip attaches to the fender, as you can see here on the fender. And also at this time you need to remove the plastic that protects the car from underneath. So now we are ready to remove the bumper. And if you can see there in the picture, there is a catch on either side of the bumper which hold the bumper to the car. It's more like a roller. So what you need to do now is pull the bumper straight forward, then lift it up a little bit and finish pulling it forward. And you can sort of make out the roller there at the bottom of the fender. And this is what we have once it's removed. Now as you can see, we have full access to the dryer. Okay, so that brings us to the drive belt, and as you can see, the tensioner is right above the compressor, and there is a hex stud on the left side of the tensioner, and I believe that that's a 16 millimeter, but I'm not 100% sure at this point. But anyways, that turns counterclockwise to its tension on the belt. And that brings us to our next item, and that is the suction hose. Now there is 1 Allen at the top of the right railing, and there is 1 Allen at the bottom of the compressor. But let me tell you what I did. I removed the compressor with both the suction and the discharge hoses together. That bolt at the bottom is kind of hard to get to, but it is doable. It's not impossible. And for reinstalling it, it is actually much easier to install the suction hose once the compressor is in place. Also, I would like to strongly recommend that you torque everything. It really removes the potential for leaks. Now, it will be a bit hard to torque that bolt there at the bottom, but not impossible. You can do it with a long extension. And don't be afraid about torquing with extensions. Extensions do not alter the torque unless you use universal joints with it. Okay, next, if you haven't already removed the dryer, you should do so at this time. Now there are 2 bolts at the bottom which hold the dryer to the condenser, and a small Allen that holds the lines on the dryer. And also there is 1 nut towards the back which holds the discharge hose going back to the compressor. Okay, so here you can see the discharge hose on the left and the suction hose on the right. And also note the 3 bolts numbered number 6. I believe that those are E50s. Now the reason I don't remember exactly is because I'm actually making this video a couple of weeks after I did the job, but I'm pretty sure they are E50s that hold the compressor on the side of the block. So once you remove those 3 bolts, you will remove the compressor from the bottom. So what I did is I simply drove the car up on ramps, and that gave me plenty of clearance to do this job. And here it is once removed, and like I said, I removed it with both hoses attached, but it is easier to leave the suction hose out on reassembly and wait to do the suction hose once the compressor is installed. Okay, so now we are ready to remove our expansion valve, and here are the basic instructions to do that. We will begin by removing the main partition wall. First, remove the weather stripping, and then remove the 2 bolts on either side of the wall and 1 in the middle which hides underneath, and then just pull it out. Then remove the smaller partition wall which will give you access to the expansion valve, and that one only has 2 bolts, 1 on either side, and it is also clipped in there, so you will have to pull it up kind of hard. And here is that partition wall Once removed, is what it looks like. And there is the bolt bracket in the middle, which actually goes underneath the partition wall. And here is the smaller one. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is that the instructions did not call for the removal of the windshield wiper arm cover. However, I decided to remove that because it gave me greater visibility and access. But also, there was so much dirt trapped in that area that I couldn't put the car back together knowing all the dirt I would be leaving behind. And I also took advantage of this job to clean and unstuck all the drainage tubes. Now, when those drainage tubes are blocked, what will happen is that you will end up with water inside the passenger compartment, not knowing where that water came from. So it was a good time to do some needed cleaning. Okay, so at this point we can finally remove the expansion valve, and to begin with we need to remove that nut labeled number 8, pull the bracket out and remove the lines, and that will expose 2 additional Allen bolts in the back which actually hold the expansion valve to the evaporator. And here's what it looks like. As you can see, it's really far in there, so this is where you need that extension to get access to those 3 bolts. I mean 1 nut and 2 Allen bolts. And also you're gonna need a magnet to retrieve the nut and the bolts, otherwise you might lose them trying to remove them by hand. Anyways, this is what it looks like. And don't forget that stuck on the evaporator side really far back there are the set of O-rings that seal the expansion valve to the evaporator. You need to replace every O-ring that you expose. And when you do that, make sure that everything is nice and clean, and remember to pre-lube your O-rings and all mating surfaces with pag oil. And also don't forget that picture earlier on with the torque specs. Remember that if you're too loose, the system will leak. And if you're too tight, you will tear the O-rings and the system will leak also. So that is why it's so important to torque these nuts and bolts on the AC system.